Frank, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. This one has been a long time in the making. I first got introduced to Frank back in 2019-ish at a biohacking event, and afterwards he was handing out some samples of KetoneAid back when they were less known, and I got to be a guinea pig of a popular new product that's meant to increase blood ketone levels. And we'll describe what that is in a minute, but excited for this conversation today.
Yeah, I remember that. I think Ben Greenfield was talking and Avisha was talking about ethanol.
Yeah.
So he's the alcohol expert.
How to biohack alcohol so that you don't get the negative side effects of it.
Yeah.
Cool. What got you started looking into ketones?
So yeah, it all started with my wife's godfather is Dr. Richard Veach. He's actually featured in this book right here, Ketones, the Fourth Fuel. He's this one right here, Dr. Richard Veach. And I was doing some research to better understand the ketogenic diet and went down that rabbit hole, and then met him at a birthday party. And normally he can't really talk about the work that he does in the ketone space because, to start explaining it from scratch is just it's like you want to send someone away to go do their 2 to 5 hour deep dive and then come back type thing. So I did that deep dive and was able to converse with him and saw what he was up to. And he had this ketone ester drink that they'd been working on for, anywhere from at least 10, if not 15 to 30 years, depending on when you want to count the actual start date, because, there's many steps before actually even making the drink, understanding the energy source and stuff like that. And initially I was trying to help him raise money, but the pitch wasn't very good. It went like this: we think people will buy $60 a day worth of a drink that tastes like vomit. And, because it was just super wild expensive. Tour de France teams were paying $5,000 a bottle for it. And wow. Dave Asprey even spent $25,000 just to have, one shot made. So that didn't go over too well because, investors, they have all these CBD options and just different things that just seem easier, and they don't want to go into the science. And there's so much noise out there that it's really hard to know what is real. So then I said, hey, I've had some successes in the .com, the last bubble. And I said, hey, why don't I just do it myself? And he gave me the blessing, sure. And then it went into 2 years of research and development, trying to figure out how to make this, how to bring the cost down and make it, somewhat affordable. It's still expensive, but, now we have people taking as little as $2 to $5 worth a day, as opposed to that, $60 number.
Yeah. So right here in front of me, I have one of KetoneAid's, Frank's company. It's the KE1 ketone ester and ketone salt, and I'm going to take that right now on air. So for anyone who's watching, you'll see me doing a quick shot.
It's a perfect thing to take before a podcast or an important meeting.
It doesn't have a unpleasant taste. I kind of like the taste, and it's interesting to know that a couple decades ago, this would have been what you said, $25,000.
Well, that one's the watered down version. So that's the KE1. This is the KE4, which is 50% ketone ester. So this is the one that would be 25,000. That one, we mixed it with ketone salt and ketone free acid and ketone ester, all three of them, and just added a little bit of peach and monk fruit. And, it's much, much easier to drink. The KE4 is still like a shot of ginger. It's still pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the importance of the biological importance of ketones. Why does this matter? Why did the ketogenic diet become such a big trend?
Well, the ketogenic diet was mainly for weight loss, for people using it for weight loss. And the idea is that if you eat 80% fat, which seems, just absurd, but you can get used to it, 80% fat, 15% protein, and 5% carbs. And many people will eat too much protein because they hear low carb and they just assume, oh, well, you can't have high fat. So they just ratchet up protein, and that's more Atkins. And that doesn't turn your body into the ketogenic state of ketosis. So the idea is that you starve yourself of a battery reserve of glucose. And once that battery goes down to zero, the body kind of freaks out and says, hey, we don't have any energy source. and then the body will go to its own fat reserves, burn fat. And when you burn fat, it makes ketones. Specifically, one of the three ketones is D-beta hydroxybutyrate. And, that helps people lose weight. It makes them less hungry, less cravings for snacks and just junk. And it's just, been a very, very popular diet. Now it's kind of weaning a little bit, I think, because all the retailers are now making all these keto products that are still artificial and, processed. And it's just not, now we're starting to see cereals that say keto friendly, keto this, keto that. And once you bring in more junk food options, then it's harder to, for the weight loss, because just because something's keto doesn't mean it's healthy. I can say that I'm vegan and keto. Just because you're vegan doesn't mean you eat healthy. I mean, there's processed meats, there's a lot of processed cheese and stuff that isn't healthy. So you still need to, eat healthily. So the ketogenic diet is kind of related to this concept of drinking ketones. So when you drink ketones, it's in this umbrella category called exogenous ketones, where you drink ketones exogenously as opposed to your body making ketones endogenously. Now, a lot of the ketone companies out there will claim, oh, you drink this drink and you're in ketosis in 30 minutes. It's a very misleading statement. I think I'm the only company that actually bucks that trend. And what they're basically saying is there's two definitions for the word ketosis. One definition is that there's ketones floating in your blood. So sure, you drink the ketone ester, drink any of these drinks, and there will be ketones in your blood. You can test it with a ketone blood meter, and great, you're defined, that definition, you are in ketosis. But the other definition that any nutritionist and most doctors would accept is that your body is burning fat to make ketones. And what happens when these companies say, hey, you're in ketosis in 30 minutes, they're misleading the customer to think that they're in the fat burning mode, even though they didn't say it. They think that they're in the fat burning mode. So they literally think that they're drinking this drink and they're just burning fat. I mean, I even saw that in a YouTube video from one of these MLM companies where the guy is saying, yeah, you're sitting on the couch and like you're drinking this. Look, I tested your ketones. You're burning fat right now. And it's just like such a misunderstanding of how it works. And so we don't say that. We say it mimics ketosis, puts ketones in your blood, but it skips that fat burning stage. So there's many other benefits to having, ketones in your system, apart from the fat burning stage. So within exogenous ketones, there's several different products. One is MCT oil, specifically the coconut oil, the C8, which is the smallest chain. The C8 coconut oil, not the C10, not the C12, and not the C14, which is the hard coconut oil. The lower the number, the more the liquid. The C8 converts in the liver to ketones, but some people call that exogenous ketones. Some people just call it, coconut oil, but it is processing through the liver, and 15% of it converts to ketones. So, that's one solution. They also call it the disaster pants diet, because you can take just 1 teaspoon the first time and feel like daggers in your gut. And so you have to really slowly raise the amount that you take over a period of time, sometimes, 2-3 weeks to get up to even 1 tablespoon. And then at 1 tablespoon, maybe you can eke out 0.3, 0.5 ketones in your blood. And again, this is exogenous. This is not triggering endogenous, which means that you can literally have cake and take these exogenous ketones and you'll show up ketones in your blood. So you haven't depleted that glucose battery that I talked about before, to go into the emergency mode.
What you're saying is that having elevated ketones in your bloodstream doesn't cause fat burning, but it's rather a byproduct of it. So
correct.
Artificially inducing that is not going to have the same effects.
Right. So you could get hyper technical and say, if you have ketones in your system, it'll suppress your appetite, which it, will do that. And then it'll help you skip lunch. And then skipping lunch, you don't eat for 4 or 5 hours. Sure. Then your body triggers endogenous. So then some companies will kind of extrapolate that sequence and say, drink this and it'll promote endogenous production. Not really. Now, maybe in sport's a different thing. We think maybe there are some signals that happen that it might actually trigger endogenous production because your body is using these ketones, and there's this emergency fuel here. We need to make more, and we're running away from the woolly mammoth or whatever. But in a regular state, sitting down on a couch is not going to do that, or at least we don't have any evidence that it's going to do that. Some people might make that statement. So the next category is called ketone salts, and what that is the main ketone, D-beta hydroxybutyrate, is an acid. It's in an acidic form. And with that acid, if you were to drink it directly, it would burn a hole in your gut. So then the solution is you add a base to it. So potassium salt, magnesium, sodium, and calcium, potassium, magnesium, sodium. So all 4 of the salts, you add that and mix them up. Doesn't really matter the mixture. Some companies try to trick you and say, sodium free, but it just loads up the other ones. And if you have too much magnesium, you get the runs, and it doesn't work. But the salt load to make the ketone salt palatable and not burn a hole in your gut is just massive. So 2 to 4 grams of salt. And I'm all for adding salt to my, in the morning I take some salt pills. I'm all for salt, but not 2 to 4 grams. And it's kind of funny because some people, they use it only when they're entering into a ketogenic diet. They're like, oh, this works great. This is, these work. And then after 2 weeks, they can't take it anymore because they can't put the rings on anymore. And what happens is when you enter into a ketogenic diet, you lose massive amounts of water weight because every molecule of glucose is attached to a molecule of water. You lower your glucose, flush out a lot of water. People love it because they think that they're losing weight, but it's really just water weight. So it doesn't really count. But you lose massive amounts of salt. And even my wife, the first time she went keto, she was in a fetal position in bed crying and heart racing and a headache. And what have you done to me? And I called some experts and they're like, give her 20 salt pills. Yeah. And I was like, you're going to overdose. You're going to overdose her. They're like, no, that's less than what's in one packet of these ketone salt products. So, and sure enough, she was fine in 15 minutes. So it's just massive salt depletion. So, the people that feel the ketone salts while entering into the ketogenic diet, they probably could do just as well just having salt pills, save a lot of money. And those companies load in caffeine, and the ketones multiply the caffeine. So you think that you're feeling the ketones. This is amazing. No, you're just feeling caffeine. Again, take 2 cups of coffee and, call me in the morning and save some money.
That's shady.
So that's a ketone salt. And within the ketone salt, 95% of the ketone salts are what are called racemic, which means only half of it is bioavailable. There's the D form and the L form, otherwise known as the R form and the S form. So the R and the D is the one that's bioavailable that the body can use. But this acid is both the D and the L form, and you still have to counter that acid with a base, even though only half of it works. So the racemic products might appear less expensive, but half of it just flat out doesn't work. So it has to be 60, 70% less expensive than a non-racemic ketone salt to really be, comparable in price. And your salt load is twice as high, again, making it not work. A lot of the ketone salt companies, they'll refer to the science and all the papers behind ketone ester, and they'll say, look, ketones work for X, Y, and Z. It's like, but it's not the same molecule. It's not the same thing. And maybe later on in the interview, we can talk about chasing ketone numbers. That I think there's more to it than just a number. So 2 products that might get you to 1 millimolar, you might think, hey, it's in the blood, 1 millimolar, they're the same. But we're finding that not to be the case.
For those listening, 1 millimolar is a quantification, a measurement of your blood ketone levels.
Right. And people say if you're between 0.5 and 1.0, you're endogenously burning ketones. If you test that first thing in the morning, and this morning I actually tested, I only test once every 6 months, and I was right at 0.5.
Do you use blood testing or breath testing? Or
I only use blood testing. Breath testing is good for endogenous production. It's not good to test with the ketone ester because if you test with the ketone ester, it can actually go out 4 hours. We actually just tested that. But the ketone ester will peak at 45 minutes with a blood test and go down quickly. And people say, oh, well, it's too short acting. You got to take it multiple times. And they're missing the fact that ketones don't do anything in your blood. It's when it leaves your blood that it goes to your heart, to your muscles, to your brain, and then it has multiple hours. And as it's converting from beta hydroxybutyrate, it converts to acetoacetate and acetone over a period of time. And this breath meter, we were able to chart that 4 hours, it was slowly increasing. So it's not just about ketones in your blood, it's about, converting.
We've covered C8, I guess all the MCTs, in particular C8, and then ketone salts. And then you're talking about how ketone esters are a more pure form of exogenous ketones.
So the D-beta hydroxybutyrate, instead of combining it with a base, we combine it with a molecule called R13-butanediol. So it allows you to have virtually no salt or no salt solutions. And R13-butanediol is similar to C8 in a sense that it goes through the liver and converts to beta hydroxybutyrate. So when you consume the ketone ester, initially they thought that it goes into the gut and then separates into two, but now they found that it actually enters into the blood in the ketone ester form, gets split apart, and then you have the fast release, just the beta hydroxybutyrate free acid right there. And then you have the slow release, the R13-butanediol that goes through the liver. 70 to 80% of it converts to ketones, whereas the C8, only 15% of it converts to ketones. So you have a much, much higher calorie number, and you're just, squeaking out a little bit of ketones. So it's much more efficient. So I asked the scientists 4 or 5 years ago, why not just give R13-butanediol? Because the process of making an ester form, bonding two molecules together, is very expensive. There's a lot of loss along the way. And if you have a 3-step process and you lose 30 to 60% each step of the way, your raw material costs just skyrocket. And that's what, we're dealing with now, because we manufacture it. We actually make it in the US. It's not like the ketone salt companies. They actually say that they're made in the US. They're almost all, if not all, made in China. And then there's this trick where you can actually take it out of the bag in China, put it into a bag in the US and say that was made, or you add one more, vitamin C or anything, and then it's, formulated in the US. So then they say made in the US. None of them are made in the US. You can even ask the manufacturer, hey, was this manufactured, in China? So with the ketone ester, I asked them, why not just give the R13-butanediol? Because it's super efficient and you don't have to bond these two molecules together. And their answer was the mice were stumbling. And I heard that, and so they threw that out as, well, that won't work for people. And I took that and ran off and filed a patent on that, because I thought that would be a great thing for human consumption in lieu of an ethanol. So something that gives you a little bit of a buzz, but doesn't have the toxic effects of the acetaldehyde, which is what ethanol converts to in the liver. And that's where this drink came from, the R13. We made a separate company called Hard Ketones, and that drink is just the R13. And we found that it skyrockets ketones. So it'll take people to 1.5, 2 millimolars per can. So just, really, really high. It costs half as much on a cost per gram basis, but we found that it doesn't work for sports performance or for even, pre-podcast. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have anxiety. Then I guess it could, but how can someone be, anxious with you as the host? But the R13, we initially gave it to people and they initially thought it was a workout drink and they went to go work out. And they said, Frank, I don't think you have a winner here, because during the treadmill run, I saw this couch and all I could think about was sitting on the couch, and it just was very demotivated. They wanted to just go and relax. So it doesn't work for that, but for the after work, come home, and people that might drink 1 glass of wine a day or something. And we had this one biohacking nurse. She does ice baths and super healthy. Her only vice was she had 2 glasses of wine every day. And it turns out that the 2 glasses of wine were those oversized glasses. So it was really 1 bottle of wine a day. And she, at 5:30, she would kind of feel the urge and the need. It's as if the body is used to waiting until 5:30 to just tell her, hey, you need something to relax. And she switched over to 2 cans of R13, and she's been 3 weeks now without any wine. And she's like, the way that she wakes up in the morning, she normally would have a little bit of puffiness, and she'd have to do the ice bath to get the puffiness down. And that happened immediately the first night with the R13. And, the way that it works is the R13-butanediol, the ingredient, we call the drink R13. It has a 1,3, but we pronounce it R13. That's how the scientists call it. So it goes through the liver and makes beta hydroxybutyrate, whereas ethanol is the base for beer, vodka, wine. Everything you drink that's alcohol is ethanol based. People sometimes think of ethanol as what's put in the car, but ethanol is every single alcohol that's out there. Mm-hmm. And ethanol converts to acetaldehyde. That's the toxin that really wrecks you. It gives Asians red face, like 30% of Asians will get red in the face from drinking it. And it's what gives you the hangovers and just it messes you up. So here you have something that's an alcohol, but it skips that super toxic step. So it's just, light years better than having ethanol. Now, is it better than having water? And, no, water is still going to be healthier, but as a substitute for that, or for the people that quote unquote don't drink, because I consider myself, I don't drink. Maybe once every 4 to 6 months, if I'm on the beach, I'll have a Corona Light or something, but I don't drink because it just wrecks me the next day. It's just not for biohacking purposes. It just doesn't make me healthy, doesn't make my mind sharp. So it's just not worth that temporary enjoyment. This time I was able to, bring a 12 pack on my flight to Puerto Rico. And every day I was able to have, 1 or 2 or none. And it was really great to be able to have something. So it's kind of for those people that don't drink because of the reason that they say that, they don't wake up fresh. And people have even sent in their Oura ring data showing, hey, here's one night that I had 1 drink of this Swedish drink. And then here's one night where I had 2 drinks of R13, and the ethanol drink, their sleep score was 32. And then the R13, their sleep score was like 85. And we've had other people send in a 93 score from having drank it the night before. And some people are getting better sleep than actually if they had no drink, no alcohol, nothing. So it's actually, the ketones might actually help with the deep sleep. So it's a completely different category of alcohol, and it's super excited about it.
Cool. Yeah. And to recap, so far, what we've discussed is one category of product of ketones that's for performance and athletics and cognition, and with the holy grail being ketone esters, and then below that is ketone salts, and then below that is C8-MCT. And then we have this whole other world that's for relaxation, sociability, recovery, just enjoyment as like a replacement for your typical ethanol, alcohol, vodka, whiskey, beer, you name it. And that's what we're talking about with R13, or as Frank's company is called, Hard Ketones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the seltzer world is super hot right now because people want the absolute lowest sugar, the healthiest of the unhealthy options that are out there. And some people even go to hard kombucha, which is, fine, but all they're doing is adding probiotics. You could just as easily drink a White Claw and then have a couple probiotic pills. It's really not much different. It's not even in that class, in that category. It's a completely new, a new type of alcohol. And we're planning on making many different products. So right now we have a seltzer that's a raspberry lime, but people don't really drink it for the flavor, and it actually tastes good. So it has nothing to do with the KE4 and KE1. KE1's fine. KE4 is rough. This is the purpose is for it to actually be enjoyable. So actually good that you can sip on slowly. But we're going to be working on a beer and also like a non-gin tonic, and just the whole lineup of anything that is made with ethanol can be converted and made, with this whiskey, tequila, anything. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting.
And why hasn't this caught on more?
Well, it has. We only launched it last month. So previously this was a synthetic material that was researched many times for NASA, for astronauts, back in the 60s and 70s, but it was synthetic and it tasted like garbage. And there was even one line in the paper that said, if they can make this more economical and taste better, this has real potential in the human food chain. So yeah, we just launched it and we've sold out of our first 3 batches fairly quickly. And we're buying more and more equipment. So each batch we can actually make 2 to 3 times more than the previous batch. But it's all relative. It's going pretty well. People really love it. I see people buy 1 trial can and then they come back and they buy the 50 pack. So that's like a great sign.
Yeah. You mentioned that it's lacking the key toxin that causes hangovers. Is that acetaldehyde?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's missing that, but it's not only just lacking the chemical that causes hangovers, but it's also biosupportive. It supports your body, whereas ethanol, like the typical alcohol, detracts from it.
Yeah, so it's actually 2 steps of magnitude better. Not having acetaldehyde is a huge step, but then on top of that, giving you huge amounts of ketones. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. And some people actually use it as a fasting tool as well to skip dinner. So it's like a reverse intermittent fasting where people can eat breakfast and lunch. They come home and skip dinner. They're just not hungry. And some people have actually eaten it with their meal. And ethanol is actually known to make you more hungry. This is why waiters will offer you drinks before you start ordering so that you order more. This makes people less hungry, and people have been eating it sometimes with their meals and finding that normally they would finish the entire plate, but now they're only eating, half of the plate, which is, less calories. Food is overrated. People don't need to eat as much as they do eat.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed, and I'll talk about that in 1 second. But if your appetite decreases as a result of consuming this, it could indirectly lead to weight loss. That's kind of how the whole semaglutide and certain things that have come into vogue recently in the biohacking world, they also work in a similar vein. So I took hard ketones for the first time on New Year's, and I think I had one before dinner and then one during dinner. And pretty quickly, I started feeling the effects, and I would call it like a mellow yet euphoric feeling. And if I had any type of nervousness or jitters, it smoothed them right out. But one thing I noticed that I didn't expect, like you were saying about the appetite, is that I usually eat 2 to 3, sometimes more plates of food, and I finished about half my plate of food, and I was like, this is strange. Like, why am I not hungry? And I just chalked it up to something different until I talked to Frank later and realized that that's a common occurrence. And then I took the hard ketones again a couple weeks later and noticed a similar but even more profound effects.
Can't say it's a placebo if you didn't know what it was supposed to do. So that's a perfect example of it. So yeah, and who would have thought an alcohol that helps you skip meals?
Yeah. And I don't have a car here, but I was thinking, like, if this isn't ethanol, of course I would never advocate driving while impaired in any form, but what would this show up as if I got pulled over after having R13?
So it won't show up on a blood meter or breathalyzer because those tests are testing for ethanol, but you can still get in trouble for driving while intoxicated. Just like if someone is taking drugs, that's also not going to show up on ethanol. So we do say not to drive while intoxicated, and we do require 21 and over signatures to receive the product. So we're still being ultra cautious and hope that people don't abuse it. Now, one thing is interesting is that the type of buzz is different, people say, than ethanol. So ethanol kind of leads to a few things. It leads to like a bar fight type mentality, this aggressiveness for some people. And it also makes you want to drink another and another and another. Once you crack open the first beer, it's like potato chips. Once you have one potato chip, you're going to want more and more and more. This is different. So while our drink might cost 2 or 3 times more than one of these hard seltzers, you actually might find yourself drinking one instead of 3 or 4. And you drink one and you're just more content. It's more of a relaxation state without that, aggressive component of it. So people, 1 and then 2, they're content. And some people compare 1 to like a Xanax relaxation, and then 2 to actually feel the buzz. And women might go all the way down to like half to feel the relaxation, and 2, 1 full one to feel a buzz. And it's also based on body weight, the bigger you are. But, Jimmy Moore, if you know him, he was going to do 3 on a live stream. And after 1.5, he was giddy as a schoolgirl, and he had to stop at 1.5. So everyone's different. We actually suggest sometimes men to start with 2. So you kind of know what that feeling is. And then the next time when you have 1, you can kind of recognize it and be like, oh yeah, that's that light sensation, the tingling of the fingers.
Yeah.
and people describe it as a cleaner buzz, like unprompted. That's the word that they use. It just was cleaner. It is shorter lived, but yeah, it's not the type of drink that you want to be doing keg stands on. It's just not like that.
I think I mentioned exactly that to you when we discussed how my experience was, that it was both cleaner and that I didn't enter into the same state as I do when I drink booze, your ethanol booze. And I wasn't aggressive and looking to stir something up and foggy headed in that same way. It was like a very different experience, but in a good way. I didn't know what to expect in terms of feeling, but I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, you mentioned not being foggy headed. So that's what the ethanol will make your brain function more foggy. This actually is ketones going straight to the brain. So for some people, it actually has the nootropic effect of just opening the brain up. But it's different for everyone based on whether you have glucose impairment problems or the brain isn't able to be fully fueled by glucose. Ketones bypasses that and brings your brain back up to 100%. And different people will notice it differently. That it's an interesting concept. It's called the brain energy gap from Steve Cunnane, Dr. Steve Cunnane. And the idea is that some people might only be able to get 70, 80% of their brain fueled by glucose. And if they've never been in a ketogenic diet or never drank ketones, they just lack that last 20%. So a ketogenic diet or ketone ester, when you drink it, the ketones will bypass that glucose blockage and just fill up the brain, that brain energy gap, take it from 70 back to 90, 95, 100%. And the bigger the gap, the more you'll notice an improvement. So if you don't have a gap problem and you're at 95, 99, and you drink ketone ester, you might not notice anything. It's not a stimulant. It's not like caffeine that overclocks you. And then, you have to crash later on. It's more about just bringing you back up. So if you have a sundowning effect where at 3 or 4 p.m. your brain is kind of faltering from the day, that's actually might be a good time to take ketone ester, while other people might take it first thing in the morning or like you did right before a meeting or a podcast.
Yeah. What I'm thinking of as you're mentioning this is that back when I was playing rugby, concussions and TBIs were top of the mind. And as you mentioned, there's a notable brain energy gap there. And I wish I knew about something like ketones or even maybe R13 back then. I don't know if that would have the same effect, but to lessen that gap and to support the brain while it's trying to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of research being done right now for ketogenic diet and ketones for traumatic brain injury. And it's exactly that. The traumatic brain injury blocks the brain's ability to use ketones. And so there's a lot of potential there. And so the worst thing that someone can do, obviously talk to your doctor after a traumatic brain injury, is give them glucose. So these sideline drinks that are full of sugar, someone has a concussion, you're feeding them glucose, and the glucose can't reach the brain, it just creates more heat and creates more damage. And it's amazing how the NFL and these different sport organizations don't have any protocol when it comes to food. What should you eat? They all talk about hiding in a room for multiple days or something like that, but there's no protocol for what should you eat. So I hope one day that someone will come out with some sort of soccer sideline concussion protocol of, so a high fat drink or something, anything other than feeding them glucose.
Are there any other related molecules that you're interested in or other products that Hard Ketones is considering?
Well, I'll go into, actually, there's a couple other ketone esters now, that we don't make, but just for your audience to understand, there's one, it's called it's called the ketone ester. It's the same category, but ours is a ketone monoester. This is, I'm drawing a blank on it. I don't know if it's a diester, technically a ketone diester, and it's a combination of the C6, so similar to C8, but C6, and then combine that with R13-butanediol. And the idea is that goes into the body. It doesn't enter into the bloodstream the same way as the ketone ester, but it goes into the gut, separates, and then you have the C6, which then goes into the liver. I don't know what percentage of that converts into BHB, but it's going to be more than 15%. It's going to be much higher. Mm-hmm. And then you have the R13 that also goes into the liver. So they're kind of competing a little bit to make ketones. So that's another ketone ester. Some people say that one or they recommend that you have to eat it with food, because the C6, C8 is already very strong. The C6 is even stronger. So if you don't have it with food, it can kind of give some GI problems. Whereas the ketone ester, it's very rare that anyone reports any GI problems, even at the higher quantities. And we're always telling people to take less and less and less. But other molecules, no. I've been working on this, R13-butanediol alcohol drink for 4 or 5 years, but it's been actually, I brought some of the raw stuff to New York for that biohacking conference and was spiking people's tonic water. We'd go to the bar and get some tonic water and put it in, and
with their consent, of course.
Yeah. Well, yeah. With they wanted to try it. They're early adopters, to say the least. Yeah. But with the ketone ester, we were sold out for multiple months and not able to make enough. And just, there's always this shiny red apple thing about, what if we made it an alcohol? It's just like, seems like a good idea, but it distracts from making the ester. Yeah. And then finally decided to launch it. And, we sold out of the first batch in a week. On Black Friday, we announced it, and we've been rushing now to make enough of that,
Who uses these ketone products? Any notable athletes or business people, names that people would recognize?
Well, so the funny thing is we've supplied 80% of the Tour de France teams at one point or another with ketone ester. So 80% of them. Only 2 of them have gone on record to using ketones, period. And none of them will admit to what brand they use. And they've even asked for discounts. I said, that's fine. Just, volume discounts, because they'll buy $50,000 worth. And and I say, just admit that you're using the drink. And they're like, no, we'll place the order. So they'll talk about all their gel packs and all the, other stuff, because it doesn't work or doesn't have a significant impact. But when something really works, then they want to, keep it under wraps. And actually a lot of the athletes some of them are actually taking it not optimally, because some of the early papers, it was always about more. So they take huge amounts. We're talking like $100 a day worth. So 3 of these bottles, one before, one during, one after, and it just was way too much. And if you take too much, it lowers your blood sugar too much. So we actually have an interview with Dr. Dag. It took me 2 years to get him on, and he's a doctor for 20 Tour de France athletes. And he talked about his protocol. And the first thing he would do is give them too much, and then have them have a blood glucose monitor so they can see real time their blood glucose dropping, and basically say, don't do that. Don't take too much. And then he gives them much less and can see the performance difference on an N of 1 trial. So we got many of the Tour de France athletes. We have hockey players, NFL players. I've had to sometimes FedEx. We got a FedEx to Texas, because we have a traveling team coming in, and he didn't bring his ketones with him, and trying to figure out overnighting them, and even finding customers that are within a 10-mile radius and tapping them for their supply to deliver it, to the professional athlete. So professional boxers, like top 3 world ranked, boxers, MMA fighters. But as far as being on the record, we don't have many athletes that are on the record with it. And even on our website, we say we don't sponsor athletes. We get athletes sponsored. And we've literally done that. We've helped an athlete go from 10th place in the nation to number 1, number 2 ranked. And then they get all these sponsors. And, we were part of that. Obviously, they work hard, but we're, I think part of that journey to success. But yeah, we've got CEOs, stockbrokers, people that are looking to get off of caffeine, their caffeine addiction, because they think, oh, it's just 1 cup of coffee a day, but it's still a drug. Actually, you were asking about future products. I think we got several products in line with the hard ketones, but after that, one plan is to make a ketone coffee, and with no caffeine, always decaf. And the idea is to break your addiction to caffeine. I'm anti-caffeine. I think caffeine worked once 20 years ago for 2 weeks, and you're basically trying to get back to that, feeling that memory that you had. And if you actually can break that cycle, you'll find that, oh my God, I actually have regular energy. I don't need it. But the caffeine puts you at a deficit and then brings you back to 95%, not even 100. and then you think you need to take it again and again. It wrecks your sleep, and then wrecking your sleep makes everything worse. It's snowball effect.
Yeah, every quarter I do 2 weeks of no caffeine just to reset my tolerance, and I'm actually in the middle of that right now. And I find that probably day 3, maybe day 4, all of a sudden I wake up and I have like the amount of energy I should have without needing to reach for anything. And That energy doesn't crash. It's steady, it lasts, and it's just as strong, if not stronger than the caffeine.
Yep. There's a book called Quit Caffeine that I read, and it has all this, it goes through all the myths of caffeine giving you energy, and it really doesn't. It's a perception of energy. It's not actual energy. And then you have a crash and all that stuff. Also, you were asking about other people that take the ketone ester. Ben Greenfield was one of the first people to take the ester and to take the R13. He played around with the raw ingredient, but also Jim Quick, the brain guy. Yeah. He loves the ketone ester. And on our Instagram, we've got an MMA fighter, Matt Brown, uses it. It was funny when I first was showing him how to use it, the first 3 or 4 times, nothing really happened. And then I remember him calling me and saying, "Hey, remember all those things you told me to look for?" It finally hit. And he said that he was at practice and he was getting this time dilation and remembering moves from high school that he hadn't used in like 20 years, and was flattening all of his sparring partners. And everyone was like, what the hell is he doing? Like they're like, I want some of that. It can take a while. So one thing I should discuss is the protocols are very, very difficult. It's not like caffeine. You just add caffeine to anything and it works. This is a food. So with food, there's many different things. So it's, what other food are you taking? Do you have an empty stomach? Do you normally take glucose? So if you normally do a fasted workout, then it's easy. You can take anywhere from 5 to 15 mLs of KE4, and it's an easy protocol. But if you normally take 200, 300 calories of carbohydrates and sugar right before, and then you take that out and you're like, I want to put in 20 calories of ketones and see if I can notice a difference. It's not going to work that way. It'll be different. It'll be energy that'll be pushed more towards the end, and your recovery might be better, but you can't get an apples to apples timer on a clock comparison to 300 calories versus 20 calories. And so it's difficult. You've got to try different ways to use it. Some people just use it for recovery. Some people just use it for sleep. And then some people use it pre-workout, during the workout. Some people use it with glucose, the dual fuel, which sounds sexy, where you have glucose and ketones as 2 fuels. But keep in mind, the glucose creates lactic acid. It creates inflammation. So it's like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, finding that balance of having either no carbs, no glucose, and your performance might be a little bit lower in the short term, but if your recovery is 10 times better and you can do 5 hard workouts a week instead of 2, you're going to have more performance gain in that. So, being less sore, taking the ketones afterward or beforehand. And, every sport. So people initially thought that it was just for long distance endurance, but, I wouldn't take it before a 100-meter dash. I don't see that working, but a sprinter that has multiple races over multiple days to be able to recover. But we had this one sprinter that said normally after his 200-meter race, he'd have to put on ice. He'd have to do a long cool down at night. And this time, he felt like he didn't even need ice. And the next day he was as fresh as if he hadn't even done it. And speaking of which, Greg Henderson, he's the first person, almost like a whistleblower, to first talk about ketone esters in the Tour de France. He was in the Tour de France 6 times. And he tells this epic story about how this team, which we now know is Team Sky, dropped a bottle on the side of the road, and for 5 miles was freaking out. Oh my God, we dropped this bottle. Like, what's going on? And he was just thinking, go get another Gatorade. What's the big deal? And then he finds out when he gets into the bus, his teammates were like, oh no, they're drinking this $5,000 drink. And then he's like, oh, now I understand why they were freaking out. And then we gave him the drink. He was able to he was at altitude. So that's one of the 3 ways that it works best is fasted rides, altitude, and hills. So he was doing a altitude ride, and his watts were 10% higher than what he would normally be at that altitude. And he knows his watts. He said, the watt meter doesn't lie. You're normally at 300. Now you're at 330. Like, it's noticeable.
Watts is a measure of cycling output, like how much power you're generating.
Right, exactly. How much power you can sustain on average over a 1 or 2 hour period. And yeah, the higher the resistance, you might go slower, but the watts might be higher. And he said that he was more impressed by the fact that the next day his heart rate variability had said that he had taken the day off. He was more impressed by that on the recovery side than the 10% gain. And he's like, this is not marginal gains. This is a noticeable improvement. Take it. Also, Mary Newport takes our stuff, and she's in the whole coconut oil mental health for elderly people world. So many different genres of people are taking it, everywhere from sport to brain to even sleep. We wouldn't have expected people reporting 30 minutes more deep sleep by taking $1 worth of the ketone ester. Have you ever taken it for sleep? Have you ever tried that?
Not for sleep, no.
Yeah. You gotta, if your Oura scores are already 95, 98, something crazy like that, it's not going to really help. But if you're in the 70 to low 80s, there's a decent chance that pick up an extra 20, 30 minutes more deep sleep, taking it immediately before bed. Doesn't help you go to bed. It's more makes you more likely to not wake up multiple times and have a more deep sleep. And we don't know why that is. It's actually by accident. The guy who wrote this book, Travis Christofferson, which I do recommend the book, Ketones, the Fourth Fuel. And on our website, when you buy our stuff, you can add the book for 5 cents. He called me up one day. He's like, hey, he took, I think too much, 10 mLs immediately before bed. I'm like, what, are you crazy? Like, this is an energy source. And he's like, no, Frank, I'm telling you, I slept like a baby. I woke up 15 minutes before the alarm, and I was just like, this is what normal people feel, as opposed to being groggy. And that set off a whole thing. And Amazon, 30% of the Amazon reviews are for sleep. So, who would have thought?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the bottle right now, and one bottle is 60 ml. So it sounds like he's taking just a small percentage of the bottle.
Well, that's the KE4. So they would take half of a capful to 1 capful. He took the equivalent of 2 capfuls of this. He took the equivalent of 1 full bottle of KE1.
I see. Before
bed. But I found that more is not always better. If I drink too much, and you go into the energy category as opposed to a signaling molecule where it might signal other hormones. So if I take too much, I have an important meeting the next day, and I'm like, oh, I want to get even a better sleep. The tendency is to try a little bit more, and then sure enough, it wrecks my sleep. But if I go to sleep at 3 or 4 a.m. for some reason, I've got a flight the next morning and I've got to catch up on stuff before I leave, sure, I'll take a larger amount before bed, and then I wake up 3 or 4 hours later with an airplane ride, and I'm pretty good. And the Tour de France people, they will take a full bottle of KE4, so like $30 worth, immediately before bed. So you have to be really, really wrecked, and you have to have, your body needs a lot of recovery to be able to take that much. So just tiny amounts. Some even women will take half of a capful or even an eyedropper, like literally 1 ml full, before bed.
Frank, can we walk people through a buyer's guide? There's so many different products on the market. How do you choose a good ketone product, whether that's R13 or that's the salt and esters?
Right, sure. Well, first I'd like to start with the C8. So the C8, you want to make sure you get a good brand when it comes to C8, because even the slightest amount of C6, ironically, in the other ketone ester C6, even if it's, I think, might even be 0.1% of C6, that is a big part of the disaster pants. So you don't want to go cheap on if you're going to get the C8, you're going to want to go on a high quality. I don't recommend C8. I just take liquid coconut oil, where you don't necessarily need the, a famous brand. I just get organic Carrington Farms, super cheap liquid coconut oil. Why drink, 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon, and maybe even get up to 2 tablespoons if you're really, really hardcore, if you can have just an unlimited amount of this, super cheap stuff and make it endogenously. So C8, you want to get a good brand. It's not going to ever say, that it has C6 in it or not, because people don't understand that. There might be ones that say that it's half C8, half C10. Okay, but why not just go further towards the C10 and C12 and get liquid coconut oil and be able to drink more at each meal. And also, the C8 has to be taken with food, whereas the ketone ester is without food. Then you go to the ketone salts. Number one thing is do not buy it with caffeine. You can maybe after you've had it for a while, if you really like it, great. You can try the caffeine or mix it with your coffee, but you're going to be, most of the products, they put in a whole bunch of caffeine because they want you to feel something, but it's not the ketones. So they bounce off the wall, jittery. That's the ketones delivering that caffeine more, but in a bad way, not like getting a free cup of coffee. It's like instead of 1 cup of coffee, it's 2, and what goes up will come down correspondingly. So don't get the caffeinated version. And then there's the racemic version of the ketone salts. So if you're not sure if it's racemic or not, it is, because it costs twice as much to make it non-racemic. So it has to say D-beta hydroxybutyrate or R beta hydroxybutyrate. Even if it says bioavailable, it's still racemic. I even saw that. I saw bioavailable because 50, they don't say this, but 50% of it the body can use. Well, that's better than 0. And they call it bioavailable. And these ketone salt pills, absolutely worthless. Placebo effect going on. It doesn't do, I don't think it does anything. The pills, complete waste of time. Go buy salt pills. You got the ketone salts. And then you have the non-racemic ketone salts. Those are much better. If you're going to do a ketone salt or you like the portability of a sachet, like a dry powder, they're fine. We have ketone salt in our KE1 mixture. There's nothing wrong with the ketone salt, but the salt load is super high. But if you're going to be a cyclist that's going to be sweating like crazy for 3 hours and 115 degrees, and you would have already taken a whole bunch of salt pills, great, maybe that'll work for you. You have to watch out for the balance of sodium and potassium as well, because if you have one super high without the other corresponding, so you might still need to take potassium pills, because some of these drinks might be super high in sodium and high in magnesium, but no potassium. So you want to get that right. So the non-racemic salt companies, there's one company that's a multi-level marketing company, and I actually defend them a lot because people say, oh no, I don't want to buy their product because they're multi-level marketing. I said, would you rather buy a quality product from a company you don't necessarily like, or a bad product from a company you do like? Which is worse? So I'd rather have the quality product, but again, only the caffeine-free version. And those products also taste better because you put them in 8 ounces of water and they put in a whole bunch of erythritol and stuff. But on Amazon, 90% of the stuff, it's going to be racemic salts, like NutriCost and stuff like that. It would stay, Dr. Veach, when he was interviewed, he did one interview with one of Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey. And he said, I wouldn't touch that stuff with a 15-foot pole, the racemic ketone salts. He's like, they had that technology 15, 20 years ago, and they literally threw it in the trash and said, this will never work. And Veach would say, your cardiologist would come and kill me because I was giving, so much salt. So that's, they moved to the ketone ester. They literally threw that in the trash as not a viable product. But then companies said, if you combine it with the ketogenic diet, when people are starting the ketogenic diet, they need massive salt load. So if they're already squeaking out some ketones naturally, and then you add this, then maybe they can notice something. And you add caffeine, you can squeak out. But a lot of these companies will sell it for weight loss, and they say drink our product and be in a ketogenic diet and you'll lose weight. And I like to say you can also be on a ketogenic diet and clap your hands and lose weight. Like, it's the ketogenic diet. Yeah, it's not and it can actually lead to weight gain if people think that it allows you to cheat more. Like, I don't cheat on my wife, so I don't cheat on my ketogenic diet. So if they think that it gets you back into ketosis, they're like, oh, then I'll just have a cake or a pizza every Friday because I can be back in ketosis by Saturday. It's just like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's
not the same.
Yeah.
One thing I see on labels is a couple terms thrown around. One is bioidentical, the other is natural, and then the last is fermented.
Okay.
Do those matter?
Sure. Okay, great question. So the bioidentical, so that is referring to it being 100% the D or the R form, but I saw some companies that have racemic salts calling it bioidentical because 50% of it was bioidentical. So, There's some companies that will make a 80 to 90% the D form. What they do is they take the Racemic and then they convert it, and they're only able to convert 80 to 90%. So, they might still call themselves bioidentical. They also still might call it R1,3-butanediol. As far as natural and fermented, so our product is the only product in that ketone salt category that is actually made from plants. So tested I think it's the USDA bio-preferred program, that it's plant-based. There's this trick that many companies do where they take oil-based product, they add some enzyme, ferment it, and then because it's fermented and changed to a different product, it can then qualify as being called natural. So it's fermented, it's natural, and they're implying that the fermentation is that they're fermenting plants, but it's not. And this one company, before they had the natural product, they actually, on the label, it said natural sweetener, natural flavoring, natural color. So I had 3 things with natural. And I said to the guy, this ketone salt is not natural. He's like, yeah, it is. It says natural on it. Like, no, it says natural sweet. Like, the nuance matters. And then he's like, no, we got into this big fight. I had him email a certain person, and the person wrote back saying, wait 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, they came out with all natural form. I said, well, what the hell was that? If this is now all natural, you got some explaining to do. So, but even the word natural, it's not plant-based. So it's, not really, well, depends how you define natural. It's very hard to define natural. Hopefully one day these products can go organic. There's potential for that, but that'll, drive up costs and might take another 10 years, but there's potential to make it organic. And we could do a lot of cost-cutting steps to bring in ingredients that, cost less, that are oil-based, but we haven't done that and don't plan to do that. So our stuff is natural and plant-based.
Are there any hacks I can do to get greater effects, more potency out of either the salts and esters, the C8, or on the other side, the R13?
Yeah, sure. So the ester and the products that we have, an empty stomach is really the number one thing with our product. With the ketone salts, apparently you don't need empty stomach. The C8, you need a full stomach. Just the way that it's absorbed. Initially in the mice study, they gave it with food. So we thought that people were going to have to drink, like I said earlier, the $60 per day amount, because when you take the mice amount, the mice were taken on a grams per kilo or gram per gram of the mice, it came out to like $60 worth. But when we actually launched the product, we found that people taking it on an empty stomach, their ketones would skyrocket much, much more than with food. So taking it on an empty stomach, I say an hour or 2 hours on both sides, preferably. People say, well, what if I only have a half an hour before a meal? Okay, you might take it, but you might not notice anything. Like maybe you'll notice some benefit, maybe some appetite suppression, for that meal, but it might be kind of wasted. Because if you have ketones in your system, and some people have, accidentally mixed it with orange juice, like, no, you can't do that, because you might read places that the body prefers ketones, but glucose still cuts the line. So the ketones are trying to make it to the brain. The glucose comes into the system. It's like, I'm going up first. The brain prefers ketones, but the glucose still gets, taken up first, and it can block a lot of the benefits of the ketones. So, not eating it for a couple hours on both sides. There's some reason to take it first thing in the morning. Bill Curtis, one of the researchers who has Parkinson's himself, has done a lot of 4 or 5 papers on ketone ester. He says that he can take it first thing in the morning, and it helps with the NAD, NADPH ratios are higher in the morning, so the ketone ester multiplies that. But then if you're trying to use it for your brain for a work day, and you're really not going to be entrenched in your work until 10 a.m., it might be kind of a waste turning your brain on at 7. So then, those people might take it at 9:30. Some people take a pre-workout, for weight loss. We do not recommend this for weight loss. I have a 90-minute video on how I don't think you should have any supplements for weight loss, because it's all mental and placebo and controlling urges. So if you take pills thinking that the pills are going to do it for you, it works temporarily, but it's not a lifestyle. It doesn't work. But some people will take it pre-workout, and sure, your watts might go up, but that's not necessarily going to make you burn more calories or lose more weight.
Mm-hmm.
So this one nurse said that she takes it post-workout, because normally post-workout, she's super hungry. She'll go grab a 300, 400 calorie smoothie. Now she can take, 10 calories of this stuff and not eat for 3 or 4 hours. Well, that's going to help, your calorie restriction. So some people take it post-workout. And if you work out first thing in the morning, your brain is going to get taxed a little bit. And then you go to the workday, you might feel fresh in the sense that you got your lungs moving, but your brain is going to be a little bit taxed. They might take it to kind of bring their brain back post-workout. Mm-hmm. So empty stomach is the biggest thing. Caffeine, it will multiply the caffeine. So some people like to take it with caffeine. I think people should try to wean off of caffeine. You might have to take more ester if you don't have caffeine, or just be aware of it. Other stacks, it does tend to multiply medicines or supplements. So I like to take Huperzine A is one of my favorite things. Mm-hmm. So it can kind of multiply that. And we do have another drink, which we've been sold out of for a while, which we didn't talk about, called Snake Water.
Oh, yes.
And this one is like 10, 15 nootropics. It's all like the kitchen sink, all added into one. It's got T-creen in it. The new version is going to have dynamine in it.
Oh, nice.
It's got the highest end cordyceps. It's just the kitchen sink, and people find that actually they can take much less of it compared to KU1, so it actually ends up costing less. And the idea behind the name Snake Water is all these companies are making all these claims, and it makes you do this and that. And I used to love this Joe Isuzu commercial from the 80s where the guy would lie. He said, this car goes 6,000 miles per hour. And then in the fine print, it said, he's lying. Yeah. Or he'd say, if this doesn't give you 100 miles per gallon, then it'll strike my mother dead with a lightning bolt. And then the mother gets struck by a lightning bolt. So we exaggerate the claims, saying, make you run, 3 times faster and jump 5 times higher. And, it's so unbelievable. Why not just embrace that with the name Snake Water? It's easier to remember as well.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do a separate episode just on that and some of the other products we're looking to create, because nootropics are a big fascination of mine. And I already love the ingredient list that you just mentioned, that short one.
Oh, and it has a slow carbohydrate. So that was very unique about it. So if you take too much ketones, it tends to drop your blood sugar too much.
Yeah.
But then we don't want the inflammation effect of the high glucose. So we use isomaltulose, which is a slow carbohydrate, a tiny amount. Normally they recommend 30 grams per serving, but this is just 5 grams, just to kind of give it a little bit of a base so that the ketones don't drop the blood sugar while giving you a sustained, low glycemic index sugar release.
That's something very overlooked on the nootropic front. The fact that the brain loves a slow bleed of glucose, and not the big spike from processed crap, but from a nice, low glycemic load carbohydrate.
Yeah, and it prefers ketones even more than that. It's it's the next step. But if you're in another country, we do ship internationally, but we don't ship the R13 internationally because it's an alcohol, much more difficult. And actually, Mexico is the only country we have not been able to get ketone ester into. Yes, the next best thing is going to be a slower carbohydrate. Mm-hmm.
Well, Frank, let's start to wrap up. But if my listeners are interested in getting a hold of you, trying KetoneAid, trying Hard Ketones or R13 Butanediol, where should they go?
They can go to hardketones.com. Right now, it kind of links to KetoneAid.com, so you can buy it on KetoneAid, and you can mix and match the hard ketones with some of the regular ketone ester as far as purchasing it. As far as drinking it together, it's kind of there wouldn't be much reason to do that because the R13 costs a lot less on a cost per gram basis. So you either want to be on or you want to be off. Which one do you? I wouldn't see any sense in mixing them. And you can also email me directly, frank@ketoneaid.com. And we have a 2,000-3,000 person message board where people post the good and the bad, things that work and don't work, and new products that we're developing. We have people vote on the next drink. Like beer is the number one thing that people are voting for right now for the R13. And number 2 is a non-gin tonic. And people post also things that didn't work. So people will text me and say, hey, this didn't work. And can you help me walk through it? And I said, hey, go post it on the forum. And they're like, you want me to post something negative about your drink not working on a public space? I'm like, yeah, because they'll make it, it makes it more believable when people read the good if there's bad. And it also manages expectations that people think, oh, this is amazing. They chug it and then they have the placebo effect and they go out way too hard and then they crash. We don't want that. So yeah, social media, Instagram, at Hard Ketones and at KetoneAid, we post, everyone trying it and their Oura ring scores. And we love it when our customers post and tag us, because then we'll, repost that as well. And people will also invent new stacks on the message board. Mixing it with sodium bicarbonate is one thing that some papers are doing. Another guy had he was, freaking out because he added something for appetite suppression. He's like, I didn't eat for 8 hours and it was nothing. So people are trying different stacks there. It's like a community of people trying different things, because it'll take years for the science and papers to catch up. And that's what I think biohacking is understanding the science that's out there now and not waiting for, a perfect clinical trial that, nails exactly that one use that you're looking, to do it. And we guarantee our stuff. So if it doesn't work, write me back and we'll refund it. Or if you don't like the taste of R13, we'll refund you. And some people don't. I've found maybe 20% of people it's too sweet or not sweet enough. Like literally, it's one person, I get an email, this is too sweet. Another email, not sweet enough. So everyone has different tastes, no problem. Yeah. We'll either refund you and have you send it back, or sometimes we have you send it to the next customer, because if we're sold out, we have customers send unopened packages to the next one.
You've got a line.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we've worked out a special deal for Mind Body Peak Performance listeners. What is that?
Outlier by itself will give you free shipping on any of the products, but then we can also do Outlier 15 to make 15% off on the R13, because we really want people to try that out. So Outlier or Outlier 15.
Awesome. And that's spelled OUTLIYR. Well, thanks, Frank.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, let's go on to some of the winding down questions. Are you ready?
Probably not ready, but all right, let's try it.
Well, I think I already know the answer to this because you've been holding a book this whole time. But if all of the knowledge on earth was to be lost, say there was a burning of the books, you get to keep the works of 3 teachers. Who would they be and why?
Yeah, one of the books would be, Ketones, the Fourth Fuel, and there's 3 guys on there. So I don't know if I can count that as the 3 guys.
That counts as one.
Honestly, I don't read that much. I'm embarrassed that I was never much of a reader growing up.
It can be works. It can be works of any kind. It can be audio. It can be lectures. It can be courses, YouTube videos, anything.
Videos on meditation. That's something that I want to be doing more of, and just how to do that. So that I think is a huge untapped thing that not enough people are embracing meditation. So I would want to bring that forward.
What's been the best your favorite purchase of $500 or less? A gear, device, tech, supplement, your own products?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not going to do my own products. That'd be too easy. But there's one thing that I'm obsessed with, and it might not seem too high tech, but I don't have it around me, but I have a retractable headset that I use as my earplugs at night, because I use regular orange earplugs, because I got orange earplugs and a night mask called Mindfold that at noon you could have this on and it's just super dark and super light. Nice. None of the other eye masks, work like this. But then the orange earplugs would fall out in the middle of the night and just not work. So I use this retractable headset that sits on the collar, and I use that as my headsets at night. And then during the day, I use that instead of when I have those individual things, I would always lose them, can't charge them. So I'm obsessed with my $60, $70 LG retractable Bluetooth headset. Like I've probably bought 15 of them because they only last 6 months, and I lose them. I'm like, I don't have my headset. I'm like talking to people on the phone like this. And like, so I absolutely am obsessed with that. And another thing that I have might be silly, but this thing, I've given this to people. You can't really see it. It's a credit card holder.
Oh, I see.
That holds your ID and a credit card. And I've given it to people and they're like, you've saved my back, because they used to carry a thick wallet and then now they don't carry any wallet. And people are like, oh, well, what if you lose your phone and your wallet at the same time? Like, well, you just don't lose your wallet. At least you can now call your wallet, right? You can lose it. So that's a $5 tchotchke thing that I'm obsessed with. And when I give it to people, because I have a KetoneAid branded one, they're just like, oh, I just love it. And like, I can't buy another phone until I have another one of your devices, because, they're obsessed with not carrying around a wallet. And Huperzine. So Huperzine is one of my favorite supplements that I learned about from Tim Ferriss for lucid dreaming, which is a whole entire separate thing that I got into a few years ago, and I could lucid dream, and you can trigger it with Huperzine. And have some crazy, amazing dreams. And so much so that you wake up and, I'll be skiing in the Alps and in my lucid dream, and I'll wake up and I'll feel like, oh, I don't have to go skiing this year. Like it feels that real that you're just satisfied. There's a whole book on Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming, which is a great book that I did read, and that helps you get into the state, and then Huperzine kicks it into gear. So that's I don't know if that's a biohack, but it's a fun hobby. I even help my kids get into lucid dreaming. And they were 10 years old. They were able to be awake in your dreams. It's not just a vivid dream. People misunderstand it, think it's a vivid dream. No, it's a dream that you wake up in your dream, and then you can change your dream and do whatever you want. Yeah,
I love that. I've actually been studying lucid dreaming and intentionally creating out-of-body experiences, and realizing that these are both things that you can train yourself to do. It takes time and diligence and practice, but I love finding the little shortcuts, the hacks, the Huperzine A's.
Drink too much water before going to bed, so that you have to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. Or 4 or 5 hours before waking up, and then take the Huperzine then. So you can take it before bed, but it stops working after 8 hours, and your REM sleep is when you have the lucid dreams more towards the morning. So if you make yourself wake up in the middle of the night, take it, go back to sleep, it's easier to get the lucid dream kick then.
Cool. Well, Frank, what's one thing that your tribe doesn't know about you?
I used to be a National Geographic photographer and was on a cover of National Geographic Kids magazine. And those photos are actually still in the Museum of Modern History the History Museum the Natural History Museum in the Smithsonian in DC right now. 2 of my photographs are blown up, and they've been there for like 10 or 15 years.
Wow, what an accomplishment.
Yeah, thanks.
So lucid dreamer and world famous photographer.
Well, I don't know about world famous, but
DC famous.
I got lucky. It was a photo of a glowing bay in Puerto Rico. It's the world's most amazing place in Vieques, Puerto Rico, where you swim, and these bioluminescent dinoflagellates will set off flashes of light, kind of like a billion fireflies just lighting up around you. It's a really neat thing, and I was able to photograph that and capture that, and have people kayaking with glowing light underneath them without Photoshop.
Yeah. Well, Frank, I'm going to hand over the mic to you. Any last parting thoughts to end this episode?
Yes. If you're to do one thing, which is drink ketones or cut back your sugar, it would be cut back your sugar. So half of the equation to everything is lower sugar, and the other half of the equation is higher ketones. And the lower sugar part is more important.
That's great. Frank, your honesty, and you're a shining light in this world of ketones and performance, something that it's hard to say when there's so many other companies out there just trying to make a quick buck and don't have the same morals. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and helping clear all the misconceptions in this world with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been great having you. I'm Nick Urban here with Frank Llosa of KetoneAid and Hard Ketones, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please